Hey, everybody, welcome to Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky opening up the Twitter mailbag at Cam Brothers, the best way to get us on Twitter, really the only way. Let's start things off, Andy, as we get ready for Game 5 with this one from Le Pete 1969, which I believe is French for The Pete 1969. How much pressure is there on Frank Vogel to play people who can score? Can we really win with three-pointers? I'll take the first half of that, Andy. A lot. There's a lot of pressure on him to play players who can score because the Lakers, they haven't been very good at that throughout the series. And with Anthony Davis presumably sidelined, that gets even harder. But I will say, to Pete's point, they can't do everything just with offense in mind because the defense is ultimately, I think, what's going to lead them to victory if they win in Game 5.
Right, but at the same time, though, I mean, the saying may be defense wins championships, and that's true, but the asterisk next to it should always be assuming you can score.
You can score. Right? That's the balance. You have to be able to score enough.
Right, and also
so it's finding that right group.
Right, and also just from a practical standpoint, you are replacing 20-plus points per game from Anthony Davis in a series where even when the Lakers have won, these games have been tight. It's not like the Lakers have been beating Phoenix when they did win like by 20-something points.
Putting up 130, 140.
Right. So you just figure whatever. You're just
we talked about this. We talked about this on the podcast, and I encourage everybody to go listen to the full episode for a lot more detail than we'll do here. But this is why I think Marc Gasol, both of us think Marc Gasol will get significantly more playing time because everything is about maximizing LeBron's ability in this game to kind of go off and score 35 points and maximize everyone else around him. And I think you do that with floor spacing and with opening up lanes for guys like Dennis Schroeder to be able to get to the basket and finish there. To the second point of Lapete's question, can they win with three-pointers? Probably not, Andy, but I do think there's a bar that they have to clear in terms of their competence with three-pointers to be able to win.
Well, I mean, to be honest, reject the second part of the question from Lapete because I don't think they're actually trying to win with three-pointers. Mm-hmm. They need to start hitting more of them, but the offense that they'd ultimately be looking to win with would be probably as much transition as they can hopefully crank up, some half-court sets, things like that. And again, hitting some type of outside shots, but, cuts, all the offense just needs to be better. But I would like to think that Frank Vogel's game plan does not hinge on the team hitting 55% from behind.
I agree with you. And that's certainly not. I just think, again, they got it. We talked about again on the podcast. They've got to shoot 35%, 30, something like they can't shoot 25% from three and win this game. But to the point that Lapete was making about offense, it does bring up a good one from Reginald Owens about Montrezl Harrell. How much should he play? Because if you're going to make a list, Andy, of the Lakers' most talented offensive players, Montrezl Harrell is on that list, and he's near the top of it. And so I go back and forth on this. I feel like there is potentially a place for him in Game 5, particularly in minutes where DeAndre Ayton doesn't play for Phoenix. But at the same time, I think they're a little hard to find because defensively, I'm going to disagree with Reginald here. He's not very good. And Phoenix will hunt him and exploit him if the Lakers give him too much time against the wrong lineups.
Yeah, first of all, anybody calling out for Montrezl Harrell specifically for the defense, Reginald Owens just exposed himself as Trez on a burner. But that notwithstanding, I think a lot of
Reginald Owens.
Exactly. I mean, there's no way that this was not Trez. But kudos. I'm glad to know that he follows us on Twitter, that he watches the videos, listens to the podcast. Thank you, Trez. Just retweet it next time. I think a lot of with Trez and the amount of minutes he gets is dependent on who he's playing with. Like, you need to make sure you've got guys out there who can protect him defensively. You need to make sure that you have enough playmakers that can get him the ball in the spots that he needs it, because he's not somebody you can rely on to generate his own offense. He's capable of it, but you don't want to make that be something that those possessions hinge on.
Right.
So I think some of the questions with Trez are answered by questions about other people.
Yeah, so I think that's the challenge. The difficulty in getting him on the floor is THT, for example, by comparison, is somebody who you can put out on the floor and he can create his own offense. Trez can't do that. And so It's Trez and who else, which I think is part of the complication for Vogel and using him a lot in game 5. This from the Nathan Mark. If we win game 5 without Davis, would you also rest him in game 6? Another topic that we got into in more detail on the podcast. I'd consider it if he's not, I'd rather have a healthier, more active Davis in game 7 and have one shot at it than a diminished Davis hobbling through game 5.
I mean, look,
and
if he's hobbling,
game through in game 6 and game 7.
If he's hobbling, no, then I wouldn't play him. If he's able to play at a reasonable level, but he's not all the way back, I would put him on the court, because you hopefully give yourself the opportunity to close the series in 6 and give yourself a little more rest, but also prevent the opportunity for something bad happening in game 7 to another player, even if they end up winning the series.
Sure. I just, my big thing there would be wondering whether or not Davis would actually be in a position to really help them in game 6.
If he is reasonably healthy enough to play, he should play.
No, we'll see. I do like you, but winning game 5 to Nathan's point gives them the option, which is incredibly important. Also gives them 2 cracks at it. Last one before we go. This from at Iman K. How pivotal is this game in the future of the Lakers dynasty? I love the presumptuousness of this question, which presumes there's already a dynasty.
If they win 2 in a row, you're starting to verge on dynasty.
He's getting there, but I'm not sure if this is a reference to all 17 championships or whatever it is, but
no, it's a dynasty, man. The LeBron AD dynasty, man. I speak fan, dude. Unlike you, you elitist snob.
I obviously, if they don't win this game, they probably don't get out of the series. And if you're going to create a dynasty with this group, that means you kind of need to win next year. It hurts the flexibility. If you're going to build a dynasty, I think it's going to come from moments like this, where you're not expected to win, where you need something to happen and you get through it. It's pretty pivotal. I mean, if you want to call it that,
I would say it's extremely pivotal because as I like to put it, the most realistic or the best shot you ever have at a championship is the one that's realistically in front of you. Mm-hmm. If you think that this one is still realistically in front of the Lakers, then it's incredibly important to win it while you can. I guess the argument against that philosophy would be if you think the Lakers could potentially end up healthier next season in the playoffs than they currently are now, and therefore give themselves a more realistic chance to win a championship next year anyway than what they're dealing with in front of them. That being said, though, they're all just going to get older.
Next year's next year.
You don't know what next year's
going to be. I agree with you. All right. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Also the Locked On Lakers podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, for all kinds of content. Obviously here on YouTube, lots of web exclusive stuff that you won't get on the podcast feed. We'll see everybody after Game 5.